pray together. Thank you, Lord, that everything that has been made is made to show your glory. And so we pray today, as we look at your word, you would form us and shape us so that we give you the glory you deserve. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, if you're a regular watcher of our channel, you may not have been expecting to see me at this point. That's because we're doing something slightly different today. So I'm going to open up the Bible to us today, but I'm going to talk for a bit. Then we're going to have a reading from the Bible. Then I'm going to talk a bit more. So I hope that suits you all right. It will be helpful to you now to grab a Bible if there's one near you, or look at Daniel chapter 8 up on your phone. You may need to give something to your kids to entertain them. Later on in the service today, there'll be something that kids might particularly enjoy. So don't send them away. Hopefully there'll be something they can join in with later on in the service. But I'm going to talk a bit first before we read the Bible together. And I want to start by asking you about what you think you would have thought. What do you think you would have thought if a year ago, last November, you'd have seen this picture of central London? If I could have shown you that last November and said, less than a year from now, this is what it's going to be like, central London, in the middle of the day. I think you'd back then have been terrified, probably, intimidated, confused, worried about what is going to happen. That means that's going to be the case. And now we know you'd have been right to be worried, because this year, since last November, a lot has happened that's been pretty grim. Even if you're a Christian watching this today, and you know and believe all the stuff that we talk about, that God's in charge and he runs the world to do good plans, I still think you would have been scared and intimidated if I'd been able to tell you a year ago that all the major democratic powers of the world would be brought to their knees by a virus. That over the year following, they wouldn't be able to think of a better policy option except crashing the global economy and locking us all in our houses. Well, if you had been able to know that last November, you would have felt like Daniel feels in chapter 8 that we're looking at today, when he gets a vision from God of the future. Now, a couple of things to remember, in case you haven't been with us or in case you've forgotten over the last few weeks, a couple of things to remember about this bit of Daniel before I describe Daniel's vision to you. The first 6 chapters of the book of Daniel tell a story, really, of how Daniel and his friends have had to live under pressure. They've been captured and dragged away to a land that isn't their own, where everybody rejects their God. And Daniel 1 to 6, they are there as models for us of how you deal with it, living in a world where everybody is against the God that you believe in. You get involved, which might not be what you'd expect. You don't withdraw, you get involved in a very godless society and seek to bring blessing even to evil people. And you accept that that comes with a cost of people victimizing and hating and threatening you. You will carry the weight of others doing wrong, but you will point people to the real God. We talked about how that's like the front line. It's the experience of people just trying to live in a world that doesn't know God. That's chapters 1 to 6. Chapter 7 onwards of Daniel changes perspective. We start to get visions of the world from God's point of view. We get the spiritual battle that Daniel and his friends are living out by obeying God under pressure, but we get it from God's perspective. And what we see is that the kingdoms of the world that hate God, from God's point of view, they're like wild, mutated animals. God sees very clearly what's hidden from us, really, which is that the more power people get, the more they behave like animals, eating and devouring and crushing other people, and the less they behave like humans, serving and loving others. And in the picture we see from God's point of view, the kingdoms have been seen as animals with horns. Horns seem to represent individual kings that rule at particular times. So that's the situation room view, the control room view, God's view of the world, that the kingdoms are like animals and the horns are kings. Okay, now we've got that background, let's dive into Daniel chapter 8. I'm going to describe the first part of the chapter to you. And when Daniel comes to receive this vision, he's in Susa beside the 𝗟𝗨 Canal. Susa is the military capital, the army base of the country that he's in, and the canal is the main economic route. Now remember, the Babylonian Empire he's been pulled in to serve. It is the military superpower and the economic powerhouse of the world. So it's like he comes to beside the Pentagon, looking at Dulles Airport, or in the middle of Shanghai, looking at the docks and all the cargo coming and going, or even a few hundred years ago, coming to in Liverpool, the second city of the British Empire, and being able to see the docks and everything coming and going out of there as the empire's economy goes through Liverpool. So as he stands there in that important place, he sees across the canal a ram. Remember, animals represent kingdoms. It's a really creepy picture actually. He's standing there and across sees this huge ram, creepy and threatening. And that ram runs around in every direction and nothing can stop it. And the message there is this: there's a kingdom coming that will trample over Babylon and replace it, even over the military and economic superpower that is Babylon. Well then, out of the west comes another animal, a huge goat with one huge horn sticking out of its head. Remember, horns represent kings, so this is another kingdom with a very powerful king. And he crushes the ram that conquered everybody else, he crushes easily and brings him down. Then at the height of his power, the goat has that horn broken off, and out of that kingdom will grow another horn, another king, that will start very small and grow powerful. And this is where Daniel's vision begins to get very disturbing, because this new king will throw down the host of heaven. This new king will attack the place where people worship the real God, Israel's God. The truth will be thrown to the ground and trampled on. There'll be no access to the truth anymore. And even though that kingdom is evil, it will prosper. Now, given that's such a shocking thing to happen, two angels who are watching the vision with Daniel have a chat with one another and say to each other, how long will it last for that this kingdom is allowed to rule and destroy God's temple and stop people worshipping God there? And the answer comes, 2,300 days. Well, in a second, Daniel's going to ask for an explanation of all of that. Much is explained to him, some of it is not. And that's the reading we're going to have in just a minute. But even before he gets the explanation, knowing what we know about what different things mean, there's still something we can understand even without the explanation, isn't there? He's actually learning something in advance that we've been walking through learning this year in our history. And it's this: no matter how stable something looks, no matter how much we depend on a government or a system for normal life, it is very easily destroyed and trampled over. It's likely to be a weak, trampleable upon system because people make bad choices, selfish choices, which mean we treat others badly. But the systems people form, powerful people, well, power is like a drug. And that means the systems people form trample over whatever is there to get what they want. Daniel stands, and where he's standing looks like it can't be attacked. But he sees one animal kingdom trample over what he thinks is strong and stable, and then another. and neither have any respect for the real God, they're still going to trample all over the world. God knows that. He wants us to know that. By now, we should know it. We don't need a dream to explain that to us. We could not have believed a year ago how much that seemed stable actually, as it turns out, is not stable at all. But there's a difference between knowing that, which we now do know, and applying it. You see, God is showing Daniel this so that he can stand against the rulers of the world when he needs to. He gets this vision in the first year of a king called Belshazzar. In chapter 5 we read, Belshazzar comes to Daniel and says, I will give you a kingdom's wealth if you can explain my dream to me. And Daniel says, you can keep your gold and your robes. And what am I going to explain to you? Well, it's this. God is going to judge you for being so disrespectful to him. It's like, how is Daniel able to do that? When we were talking about that in our Connect group, we were talking about how he has so much nerve to take Belshazzar on, speaking up against the weight of this very powerful kingdom that could have had him killed, that had no respect for his beliefs. We know he doesn't get killed because we know the end of the story, but he didn't know that. How did Daniel have the nerve to behave that way? Well, it's because he'd seen this vision. That even the military and commercial capital of this seemingly unconquerable kingdom would be trampled all over. And then the kingdom that trampled this would also be trampled over. What looks permanent is not. And we need to know that about these strong, permanent-looking things if we're going to obey God instead of submitting to them. A few years ago, I was having a chat to a professional person about their work and their workplace. And I, just making conversation, I wasn't trying to pressure them, sort of said, what's it like to talk about your faith in your workplace? They said, oh, no, that's not allowed in my work. My line of work would be very disapproved of, not allowed at all. There's a policy against it. Not only that, but the boss doesn't like us talking about my faith. In fact, now that I've realised you've made me think about that, do you think I should leave my workplace and go somewhere where you are allowed to talk about your faith? No. No, you should not. You should, like Daniel, work to bring every possible blessing to that godless workplace and your anti-Christian boss. But also you need to accept the moment's going to come when you are going to speak up for what God says, even though it is not allowed. That you are going to invite a friend from work to something. You are going to offer hope to a dying person who needs it. And why will you do that even though it's not allowed? Because you'll remember, this structure ruling you is an animal kingdom. You've seen behind the curtain to reality. It's run by people who are behaving in a less than human way, and you aren't going to respect that more than what God says. In fact, given the human-built systems tend to just chew people up and spit them out, trample all over them, it's not some act of terrible rebellion to face up against the system that says you can't do that. That is a way of being a blessing. If you obey God, who wants us to be truly human, more than you obey the man-made rule, which is all just about the exercise of power over people. Here's a problem I've got at the moment with not really seeing anybody in church that I don't know. I don't know for you watching this what social rule or man-made law or workplace policy you're following instead of pouring out blessing to evil people. Well, you're saying, oh, I'm not really allowed to do that here, so I won't bring blessing by acting or speaking in a certain way. I want to encourage you to look behind the curtain. I don't know what the specifics are, but this view today is to help you look behind the curtain of what's apparently not allowed. None of those systems are secure. They won't last forever. all of them come about because fallen humans are struggling for power. That's what is there in front of you. It would be much better, like Daniel, to honour God and do what he says. We've experienced in the last year that those things that claim rule over us because they say they can save us, they're much less stable than they seem. So the wise thing to do, the right thing to do, is always to bring blessing to evil people and always speak up the truth about God, even if the animal system doesn't want that. That's what we learn even before Daniel's explanation. But Daniel wants an explanation of this vision, and that's the reading from the Bible we're going to have now. So if you've put your Bible down or switched it off, pick it up, Daniel chapter 8. We're going to start reading at verse 15, and we're going to have Rebecca read that to us now.
Today's reading is from Daniel chapter 8, verses 15 to 27. While I, Daniel, was watching the vision and trying to understand it, there before me stood one who looked like a man, and I heard a man's voice from the 𝗟𝗟 calling, Gabriel, tell this man the meaning of the vision. As he came near the place where I was standing, I was terrified and fell prostrate. Son of man, he said to me, understand that the vision concerns the time of the end. While he was speaking to me, I was in a deep sleep, with my face to the ground. Then he touched me and raised me to my feet. He said, I am going to tell you what will happen later in the time of wrath, because the vision concerns the appointed time of the end. The two-horned ram that you saw represents the kings of Media and Persia. The shaggy goat is the king of Greece, and the large horn between its eyes is the first king. The 4 horns that replace the one that was broken off represent 4 kingdoms that will emerge from his nation but will not have the same power. In the latter part of their reign, when rebels have become completely wicked, a fierce-looking king, a master of intrigue, will arise. He will become very strong, but not by his own power. He will cause astounding devastation and will succeed in whatever he does. He will destroy the mighty warriors, the holy people. He will cause deceit to prosper, and he will consider himself superior. When they feel secure, he will destroy many and take his stand against the Prince of Princes. Yet he will be destroyed, but not by human power. The vision of the evenings and mornings that has been given you is true, but seal up the vision, for it concerns the distant future. I, Daniel, was worn out. I lay exhausted for several days. Then I got up and went about the king's business. I was appalled by the vision. It was beyond understanding.
Well, thank you, Rebecca, for reading that to us. I wonder, did you ever have the explanation at school, the situation at school where you put up your hand and said, I don't really understand that, and the teacher said, okay, well, let me explain it to you. And then it was explained to you and you thought, no, that was even worse, understand it even less, but you feel like you have to nod and say, thanks for explaining it to me. Kind of the experience Daniel has had here. He says he wanted to understand the vision at the start of the passage, but did you notice by the end, he says he was worn out, exhausted, he felt sick, and he was appalled by the vision, and it was beyond understanding. So I think what we're getting from that is that as we look at the world from God's point of view, we are doing our best to grasp a world that's not really fully ours to understand. Nevertheless, there's still stuff we can learn. And here's the first thing in this part of the talk I think we learn. We can be terrified but comforted by the truth. We've talked about how disturbing it would have been for us to see the future this time last year, to see the wheels coming off the world as we knew it. We would have known as a Christian that wasn't beyond God's control, but it still would have been scary. Well, that's Daniel's experience. He's seen fighting kingdoms cause this huge mess of destruction across the whole world that he knows, across the canal, beside the canal where he's standing, this huge economic route, God's voice is heard. Now remember, none of the people slugging it out for control in the world really respect God at all. But the truth is that God is always there. Particularly, God is always there by his word, even as the people in the world destroy each other. God's voice rings over this powerful city and the chaos that the warring kingdoms are causing. And right there in the midst of it is God's right-hand person, if you can call an angel a person, the angel Gabriel, who we'll be talking about a lot in a month or so's time, because he's the same angel who centuries later would put God's plan into action by coming to talk to people called Zechariah and Mary. They were also terrified of him, as it happens. The angel comes so close to Daniel that he's terrified and falls down to the floor. And then the angel tries speaking to him to explain things. And I love them. It's like the angel's like, "Oh, Daniel, let me explain it to you and talk to you. That'll be all right." But that's so terrifying, he faints into a deep sleep. It is a series of terrifying events. It's terrifying to see what's going to happen in the world, the chaos that's coming. And we think it would be like, "Oh, there, don't worry, God's in charge." No, coming face to face with God's spiritual rule of the world behind the scenes is also terrifying. And trying to have it explained to you is so scary it makes him faint. An angel talking to me is not helping me feel better, Lord. But look at what happens next. I love this. As Daniel faints with the fear of what's going on in the world and knowing God's holiness behind it all, the angel reaches down, touches him, and picks him up, raises him to his feet. It's very similar, actually, to another part of the Bible in the New Testament, where the Apostle John meets the risen, glorious Jesus, and he's terrified. But the risen, glorious Jesus wants to pick John up and raise him up and give him a job to do. Maybe you know how Daniel feels. Maybe you get intellectually what I've been saying today, that it is part of God's plan for the world, that all the things we rely on for stability to come and go. I say to you, and the Bible says it, listen, God is going to allow selfish animal-like people to trample over stuff we think is really important. And then I say, but hey, the answer to that is, don't worry, God's got a cosmic eternal plan that means we can stand for what is right. And actually what you think about that is, that's even more overwhelming, that I have to play some part in this. I'm just me. I can't join in any cosmic spiritual plan. I can't take on the terrifying system. It's too much. Both the situation and knowing God's in charge of it, both truths are terrifying. I just want to ignore it and curl up in a ball and lie on the floor. I feel sick and I want to faint. The facts are alarming to normal people like me and you. What's going on in the world at the moment is terrifying. And the fact that there is a burningly holy God at work in the world, bringing down arrogant kingdoms, the fact that he reveals to us that all the things we think are stable and normal are in fact pretty wicked and against God, well, thanks for the insight, God, but it's all still pretty overwhelming. I want to curl up in a ball. But I want to assure you today that when God's holy presence comes close, when this terrifying angelic being walks towards Daniel, one of God's people, it is to touch his shoulder and lift him up. I think that is the word for some people watching this today. I think a lot of us, a lot of the way I feel and the way I talk to a lot of people at the moment is I just feel overwhelmed with all the change that's going on in the world. And you saying, well, God's got a cosmic plan that you're part of, that's just overwhelming too. And I want you to know, like Gabriel in Daniel, like Jesus himself in the book of Revelation to the Apostle John, he is bending all of his spiritual power towards helping you, towards lifting you up so you can do what needs to be done to obey him. The idea of all this terrifying bigness of what's crumbling around us. When we come close to the eternal, burning, glorious God who rules over all of this mess, he never tells us off. He's never trying to frighten us, even though he is huge. All of his spiritual power is there to come close to us, to pick us up, to help us face what it is we need to do. You know, at the end of this vision, Daniel went about the king's business. Oh, he felt sick for days, but he was able to get on with his job. And maybe that's the truth you need to hear today about our world, that God by his Spirit is behind it all, working it all out for good, but he's with us, not crushing, burning, pushing us, but if we know Jesus, he's with us, strengthening us to do whatever our small part is in this huge, unfolding, terrifying plan. Maybe that's the thing you need to reflect on today. There's some part you have in standing up for what's right in this week to come, speaking up in a particular place, working together with others to bring Jesus to somewhere, doing something. And it's overwhelming, it's terrifying. And a series of poor, selfish rulers make your life harder. God's close to you, and he's not close to you to terrify you. He's not saying, I'm bigger and more glorious than all the rulers of the world, so you can feel smaller. He comes close to people to gently touch and lift us up. All of his spiritual power is bent towards Christians to enable them to face and do what he needs them to do. We're terrified but comforted. Here's the next thing we see. We don't have misplaced faith. When Daniel has regained his composure, the angel explains what's going on to him. The ram represents the empire of the Medes and the Persians, which is coming next. The goat represents the Greek Empire. And the horn that grows up represents, therefore, a Greek king who's very bold and actually wants to persecute people who belong to God. He's deceitful and cunning, and he will in the end set himself up as God to be worshipped against God himself, but God will bring him down. Well, that happens. The Medes and the Persian Empire conquer the Babylonian Empire within the book of Daniel. But after Daniel finishes, later on in history, that empire is crushed by Greece under a king called Alexander the Great. Well, within the Greek Empire, there was jostling for power after Alexander died. And in the end, this terrible king called Antiochus Epiphanes persecuted the Jewish people, destroyed the temple, and insisted his own God, and in fact, he himself should be worshipped there. Now remember, Daniel's great hope while he was away from home in Babylon is that the temple will be rebuilt. And God's basically saying, well, it will be, but after Babylon, more kingdoms will arise that hate God and want his power. And that temple, that is your great white hope, is going to end up knocked down with no sacrifices for years on end. Now, maybe you've got some interest in ancient history, so this is something you're interested in. But you may be wondering what this very specific vision has to do with us, seeing as it was in the future for Daniel, but it's already happened at our point in time. Well, I'll tell you what it has to do with us. All of this is saying to Daniel, don't feel too at home in Babylon. You know, Daniel knew he was one of God's people, but he'd been 50 years working for the Babylonian kings by this stage. God's saying, don't plant your hope in Babylon, Daniel, because that's going to be destroyed by another animal kingdom. And then another animal kingdom will come, and unsurprisingly, as these kingdoms love their own power, they will not honour God. The more powerful they are, the more they'll hate God and his people. And it's strange, isn't it, Daniel should feel appalled and sick by that, because we think, well, it was a godless kingdom, Daniel, you should be happy it's destroyed. But of course, we're not enjoying the destruction of the godless kingdom we rely on for stability. Babylon was godless, but it was his, it was what he knew. God is saying, nevertheless, Daniel, don't put your hope in Babylon or Persia or Greece. Godless kingdoms always want their own power. They always end up hating God. Now, obviously the kingdom of the fourth horn is worse than that of the ram, but they're all animals. They're all destroying others to get power for themselves, and Daniel would make a big mistake to put his hope in any of them. And Christians would make a big mistake if they put hope in any leader or government to save them. We have this played out for us in current affairs at the moment. I saw one American Christian this week tweet that voting in Joe Biden is like a national exorcism, a removal of a demon. Well, there's only one person who can exorcise people, and it's not Joe Biden. And you may well think that Biden is better than Trump, but I promise you, as sure as anything, his administration will become more animalistic, less human, the more power it gets. Joe Biden will do a lot of stuff against God's law. That's normal. We should expect it. Similarly, there's lots of footage of people who desperately want the result to be overturned, Donald Trump to stay president, praying outside of polling stations because Trump is God's person. Well, you may well think Trump is better than Biden, but it's also clear from the last 4 years that he is a self-obsessed narcissist who is using Christians to get votes. We don't put our hope in human kingdoms. Either one. We don't relax when our person is in office. We don't vote to get someone who will put our interests first. We accept what this vision shows, that because people rebel against God, history is simply the story of sinful humans making systems that behave like animals, crushing, eating, pushing others out of the way. We do not think our person will make things better for us. Of course we don't. And I'll tell you why we don't think that. Because if we begin to think that about any political system or leader, we will not do the thing we're supposed to do, that Daniel models so well, of speaking the truth to powerful people. If our hope is in that person, keeping things right for us, we're never going to call that person to humble themselves to turn to God, because that will disadvantage us. We won't do it. If Daniel thinks the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians is better than the Babylonian kingdom, will he point out to the next king that he needs to humble himself before the real God? Of course he won't. We've actually seen that. Donald Trump's inner circle, Christians who've hitched their wagon to Donald Trump to get what we want, they don't seem able to tell him the truth about himself and his arrogance. If you tell everyone to thank God that he's elected, it's hard to say, actually everyone, though, he's not a model to follow. Similarly, if you're dancing in the streets about Joe Biden being elected, well, you'll be tempted to overlook and not challenge what he's likely to have as pretty poor policies on, say, the ethics of the start of life. People who feel they should say people will not feel they can say, the people who surround Joe Biden will not feel they can say, you personally need to repent and put your trust in Jesus, if they think he's advancing our interests. We don't want to upset him. We view all governments as animalistic, as against God, and so they need Christians to bless and speak. Now, of course, some rulers are worse than others. I don't expect the British government to respect God, to reflect what he thinks is important, but I'm perfectly clear it is absolutely nothing like living in North Korea, where Christians are enslaved and crushed and tortured. But any reliance on leaders, hope in leaders, is going to stop me speaking the truth to power, and my job is to do that, whatever the person in power is. It may not be you're not into politics, that's fine. I think a lot of people work under terrible bosses, and they think, if I get a better boss or move to a different job, everything will be okay. And you might move to a different job where everything feels better. And so your hope is in, wow, this is so much better for me. But then you will forget to think, this also is a godless power structure that needs me to speak truth to it. You know, pharmaceutical companies are going to come to our rescue from coronavirus with a vaccine. Praise God for them. But we're going to find out in this process that they're also full of immoral, self-seeking people. We need to pray for Christians to be there to say and do what's right, even if it costs them. Christians do not think everything will be better when we have a better person in charge. Or Christians don't think, we can't let this person get out of power because they're looking after my Christian interests. We know all rulers are only kingdoms that behave like animals that we speak truth to. Now, some Christians, realizing that, have counselled for withdrawal from the real world. But do you see, Daniel does the right, in fact, opposite of that. The fact that people behave like animals when they have power means Christians mustn't withdraw. All the more we need the people of God there in the centre of it, doing good, speaking up, challenging evil, pushing for what's right. But not because this person is our person who gets us. As soon as I begin to think that about them, I won't be able to speak the truth to them. You know, someone told me recently that there is someone at the heart of our government at the moment who is a Christian. In fact, they told me they voted for that party because they believed that about that person. So by putting that out there, that person got some votes. They said to me earlier this year, because that person is there, the government won't close churches again. Of course, they did. My friend who voted for them for that reason immediately began to excuse that and said, oh, well, you know, they must have their good reasons. We can't criticise the government for doing that because I know there's a Christian in there. But no, it is our job to accept that all systems are broken and we speak truth to power, to take the prophetic stance and to pray for that person, if they are a believer, to take the prophetic stance. We assume that powerful people behave like animals and we don't put our hope in them. Whether it's the moderately friendly Persian Empire or the hating God Greek Empire, our hope is in God's kingdom. We honour God, we do good and we speak the truth, and that's what we pray for Christians who have more access to power than us. Remember Daniel, he's standing in the middle of the most secure place in a bad empire, but one he knows. And God says, listen, another one's coming, and another one after that, and another worse one after that. Daniel, each one is going to demand God's people submit to it. Each one is going to say, throw down what matters to you most. But this vision is here so that we never buy the PR. We are in the middle of it, absolutely, but speaking God's truth and doing God's good. That's why God shows us nothing is that strong. We live to please and honour and do what is right before God, not before anything else, no matter how good it looks. We do not live to honour social services, to honour the NHS, to honour a particular charity, to honour a particular view of society. That would be a mistake. We always work for the blessing of doing good to things that are evil. But our hope is always outside, so we can speak truth to people with power, which is what Daniel goes straight on to do after he sees this vision. Well, here's the last thing we see. We don't understand, but we understand enough. You know, when the angel is finished, Daniel felt sick, he went about his work, he was appalled, and he didn't understand. When we were discussing this as a staff team, someone said, why didn't he get an explanation he could understand? Well, everything about how and why God does things is not ours to understand. There's a figure, 2,300 days in this passage. No one knows why it's that figure. Everyone's got a theory that you read, but no one knows. There's lots he doesn't understand, but he got enough to wake him up to the reality of the world and the people who have power in the world. He got enough that he could get on with the work he had to do. Now listen, the things I don't understand greatly outnumber the things I do understand. I do not understand why this is happening to us now. I don't understand how everybody will be able to cope with this. I don't know when I will be able to hug my parents again. I don't know those answers. And to be honest, if I had my eyes open to everything God was doing in the world, it would be beyond me. I'd just feel sick and terrified. But I know enough to get on with what God has for me to do. I know enough to say, listen, I'm not going to obey any human ruler, any animal kingdom over and above obeying God. I know enough to say, no human leader is the hope of the world. I'm going to work for the kingdom that lasts forever and try and bring people into that kingdom. I know enough about Jesus as well to know this, that the world is terrifying, that God's holiness is terrifying, but when he comes close to us in Jesus, he picks us up, faces us forward, and gives us what we need to do, whatever it is we've got to do. I know that. I understand that. There's only one person who rules forever. Only one human being who is stronger than every human kingdom. And I know he's also kind. He's also gentle. He also helps. So as the curtain is drawn back, the mess of the world and that people make of it is exposed. I go to him, the one who has the eternal kingdom, but is also kind. And when I go to him, I find I understand enough to do good where I can and speak truth, even in the most wicked places. Let's pray together. Thank you, Lord, so much that you draw back the curtain for us to see what we need to see. Please, as we feel overwhelmed, pick us up, face us forward, help us hope only in the eternal kingdom and not in the kingdoms that are passing, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.